Okay. So, one of the things we were talking about on our last show was we're talking about the roles that women and men play, and you were saying masculine energy,
masculine and feminine energy.
So just explain what you mean by energy, because some people may be switching off at this point if they don't understand what that means.
No problem. In the whole of our lives, there is masculine and feminine energy. So I'll give you some examples. So masculine energy is very directed. It's about achieving goals. It's about targets. So at work, we would use masculine energy typically to achieve what we want to do.
So if we say traits, so people don't get lost
that's
in
a good
it.
word. Yeah, so traits. So the traits of masculine energy are direction. They are things being structured. It's masculine energy. It's like drive. It's what gets us up in the morning. We have to get up. The alarm clock goes off. We've got to achieve certain things. So it's something which is all around us. We use these masculine traits all the time. Whether you're male or female, you use them. Feminine energy, the traits of feminine energy are creativity, relating to others, spontaneity. So in our Western world, we would probably typically use more feminine energy in our leisure life. So where we do things more spontaneously, where we go out with friends and family, where we maybe pursue creative pursuits. However, they're both important at work, because if you don't have relationships, how can you actually grow a business, for example, if you don't have good relationships? And what's happened since, again, going back to really women's lib, the 1960s, is that because women, with women's liberation, started to take more places in the workplace, and they started to take on more masculine traits. So I suppose who really typified it, if you want a really good example, Margaret Thatcher. I mean, she even wore suits which looked like men's suits because she was a woman working in a man's world. So she took on a very masculine traits in order to survive. And actually, this is what I did. I worked in marketing and media, and even though it's not like engineering or construction, it was still a very male-dominated world. So I adapted and took on more of those masculine traits of being very directed, very goals-orientated, sort of quashing my creativity in some way in order to achieve, in order to stand out. So those are the two, that's what the masculine and feminine traits are like. Now what you'll see, and in relationships, and this is actually based in psychological theory, I'm not going to go into great detail, but this is based on Jungian psychology. In a relationship, an intimate relationship, not a relationship with your friend or family, but an intimate relationship with a romantic partner, the relationships that work and the ones where you feel that chemistry, where you feel that connection, are where you get a balance of masculine and feminine traits. If you get, it's like magnets, and it's like yin and yang, where you get the opposites which work together in a complementary way. And if you get two people who have both got predominant masculine traits in the relationship,
two yins and two yangs,
it just doesn't work. You can see it, can't you? You wouldn't get anything done, or you get too much done. And it's also about that chemistry that you feel. That this is quite subtle, but once you understand it, you'll start to see it. Have you ever noticed those? I mean, I often use, I don't know whether this is, I often use Sex and the City as an example, because a lot of people do know about Sex and the City. It's very visual, where Carrie Bradshaw can't stop being attracted to Mr. Big. And Mr. Big is very masculine. And she is very feminine. And there's a connection between those two, which they can't resist each other. And yet when she goes with Aidan, you know, with the furniture maker, who's much more, he is actually much more feminine. She doesn't quite, the connection just isn't
even if
quite there.
On paper, he looks like a better guy.
That's right.
All of us will say, no, we want Aidan because we love Aidan. He's a nice guy. He's a sweet guy. Yeah,
that's right. She's attracted to the more masculine man. So a really good example of this is where actually what's happened, and I'd say this is really over the last 40, 50 years, is that women, and this is changing because I think actually the corporate world is now embracing feminine traits, relationships, soft skills, all of that, but it's still very masculine.
Yeah.
Logic still usually is the...
Because the balance is still not right. We still don't... It's not that there are 50% men and 50% women in the workplace.
Exactly, yeah. So what's happened over the last 40, 50 years is that women have taken on more masculine traits in their workplace, and it's enabled them to succeed and survive. And then they get home and they're still in that masculine mode. So this is where you see that typical thing of women emasculating men, telling them what to do, dominating them, being very controlling. And obviously that's such a turn-off. So one of the biggest turn-offs for men with a masculine energy are controlling women. The other thing which has happened alongside the women's lib movement is there has been a men's movement. And I don't know if you remember, this seems really old hat now, but do you remember the new man in the 90s? People always talked about the new man. And the new man was all about a man who was softer, more in touch with his emotions.
It's like your alpha man now, they talk about these days.
It's flipped. Yeah, that's right. Whereas I think it's about the 90s where it was all about the new man, and it was sort of like, I suppose it's like it's a bit like the metrosexual, bit, but the new man was all about a man being softer, probably more feminine, more emotional. In touch with his
emotions.
Exactly, that's exactly it. And what actually happens is, if you get that type of man with a woman with lots of feminine traits, they cancel each other out. And that's where women will say, I really like him as a mate, but I wouldn't want to go out with him. Because they're really good as a friend, but they don't create that buzz and that connection with that opposite energy. And what I must say this because people will take this the wrong way, you don't have to be a man to have predominantly masculine traits in a relationship, and you don't have to be a woman to have predominantly feminine traits in a relationship. You just need to get the right combination. So I know men who, they don't want to be the breadwinner, they don't want to be driving, they're much more creative. The new phenomenon, which is growing, is where men do more of the childcare and the women pursue their careers. And for a man to feel happy with that, he is probably going to feel happier using more feminine traits in the relationship. It doesn't mean to say that they're, girly, it's just using those feminine,
and being with someone who has the opposite of that.
Exactly, yeah.
But do you think men would own up to that?
I think it's difficult. Yes, it's difficult.
I think in a relationship, I don't think a man will set off, if he's doing your exercise, for instance, he would say, well, I want a woman who earns more than me, who does that, I don't think he would state it like that, because I think society tells him that he has to be the man.
Yes, I agree, there's a lot of pressure, but I have coached men who, when I've taken them through that process of understanding whether they have more predominant feminine energy or more predominant masculine energy in a relationship, I've taken them through that exercise, and it's turned out that actually they want to actually use more feminine traits in the relationship. They've actually realised it, and they haven't seen it as a criticism or that they're not a man. And it's really helped them because they've realised that they've actually been attracting the wrong type of people. So it's helped them to think, actually, I admit that I'm happy with a woman who makes the first move, who wants to control much more in a relationship, who wants to drive the relationship, and it works. And similarly for women, it's hard for women. It's hard. Maybe women are actually more accepting of it. They're more accepting to say, yeah, I do prefer to be more in control. I do prefer to drive more.
Interesting. I'm completely opposite. I'm a bit like I don't want to use Carrie as an example, but I'm a girly girl.
Yes.
I want to be a girl. I want to be. I want the man to be the man.
Yes. I would say that in my experience that is much more the typical scenario. But there are exceptions. Exceptions. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And one of the things to really understand this, because this is a big concept to understand, and especially just to talk about it. Over a few minutes. But one of the ways that you can distinguish whether, and I must stress here that it's not about you being more masculine or feminine, it's about what you feel most comfortable in a relationship. So, for example, at work, I use a lot of masculine traits because I need to get things done, I'm very driven, but in my relationship I definitely want to use the feminine traits. And the way to really understand which is more important to you in a relationship, there's someone who wants to be more masculine in a relationship. It's more important in that relationship to have their thoughts and opinions respected than their feelings and emotions
recognized,
cherished. And that's the key word. Cherish is a very feminine concept. You think about cherishing a woman. You wouldn't think about cherishing a man typically, would you?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,